heard it that time. Okay, hi everybody. Today we're gonna be discussing traditional teachings and bladed mind way of teaching. I've been talking to Nain as far as what we do and how our system is so different from the traditional stuff that we've seen. Nothing wrong with tradition. I think it's great. I've come from a lot of different systems, and anytime I do that, I'm doing what they tell me to do. There's nothing wrong with it. Danny came and showed me another way of learning, and this is what we're discussing. It's the bladed mind way. One of the things that we understand about traditional is that whenever they teach something, it's given in a rigid manner. They say if it's a punch, as in karate, this would be a punch, and you would learn, you'd understand. The teachers would correct you if you're doing it wrong because they want you to move a certain way, and that's what that would be. So if I'm in my horse stance and I'm throwing my punches, it had to be this. As I come in and I pull back and I punch, that's tradition. But we've come to notice that in any of the other traditions or any other systems, you don't really fight the way you're taught. It just doesn't happen. You go to a street fight, you don't get up there and you go, okay, and it doesn't happen that way. So there's a problem with that, in that if I can only use that in a tournament fight, and even in most tournaments, you're not going to, depending on what the system is, you're not going to do the techniques or the drills the way you were taught in those classes. And that's where the bladed mind is different, in that we're not talking about how to throw things a certain way. We're talking about what's behind it. We like to understand why we're doing that, what are the mechanics involved, and how our body has to move for the individual. And that's something that I've noticed in a lot of other schools. They don't do that, or they don't explain that. So we're here today to kind of figure out why that is, and how that then will either help or hinder. Again, nothing wrong with tradition. I've done that most of my life up until I learned what I learned from my brother Danny. We understand what we understand because of the way it's given to us. Danny has created a way of understanding what we know in 5 segments. The first of it would be the first level of understanding, which is what we call the gross motion. If you understand anything about stick fighting or Kali or Screama or Screamador or Arnis, you would understand that this would be an angle 1. So if I'm doing a gross motion of number 1, this would be it. I'm coming from here, going across, and I'm striking my opponent, and I come back. But then the level 2 of understanding of that would then be a detail. What are the details involved in this gross motion? Well, then I want to make sure that I have my hand cocked back, make sure my muscles are here, that the shoulder's going to turn this, and as I move, my shoulder's going to move forward, and I'm going to bring that in. So that's the details of what I do. From there, we go to the 3rd level of understanding. 3rd level of understanding is the variation. What are the variations of what I'm doing with this particular move? If it's an angle 1, well, what's a variation? Well, instead of hitting with the tip, I might want to hit with the puño. But what does that entail? Oh, that means I have to get closer, because the range from out here, I might miss my opponent. But if I come in closer, oh, I'm in range now that I can use the puño or the butt of the stick, and that would be. But the thing is, the strike and the angles and everything is still the same. It's just now I'm changing. I'm varying what I'm hitting with or how I'm hitting it. So that's variation. From there, we go to the 4th level of understanding. The 4th level of understanding then becomes, how do I teach that? How do I convey that to my students or to a fellow student in the student's case? And then from there, the final of that would be 5th level of understanding, then would be that particular individual's Kali, or how they then perceive everything. Because once you start understanding your own way of doing things and how you teach the lessons that you have, then everything changes. Then it becomes your Kali. It has nothing to do with what I taught you or what Danny has taught you. It becomes yours, and that's why we have those 5 levels. So now I'm going to ask Nain, the question that we were talking about is that, what is it about what we do that makes it so different, and how do we, and why do we think that it's, different than most people in the way that we're giving the lessons. You know, I've always said that it's not what we teach, but how we teach. So, what were your thoughts on our system?
Well, take into account the idea of traditional ways of teaching. You get a set of instructions, and you follow the instructions, and the end result is going to be whatever the design instructions were for. So that's why you can identify certain systems by the way people move, because they follow step by step and got it. Technique, drills, whatever the case may be. And I think that people in general are so accustomed to that idea that even the students within the blended mind get caught up in level 1 and 2 of what we're taught, which is why we seem a bit robotic at the beginning. We start moving and we follow the instructions at face value.
Now, you said in the beginning, does that mean that early on you're taught a certain way and then it changes after a certain time?
It seems like it's an inevitable part of growth, but while in traditional systems you have, say, X amount of students, after a year, half of those students are gone.
And why is that?
Because a lot of them can't adapt their physical movements
Right.
to look the way that their teachers want them to.
Okay.
That's why you see certain physiques and certain types of art. You see thinner people or more flexible people in like grappling, or you see stronger and bigger builds in striking systems.
Right. And like judo.
Like judo,
Sumo wrestling.
taekwondo. Exactly. There's certain physiques that fit to certain things, and after a year, people start figuring out, oh, this isn't for me, so they leave. After 2 years, half of the people that are left, they quit. Because, again, they can't adapt to the newer or more advanced ideas or concepts that they're taught.
So, on that logic, is that why you see a lot of fatter people playing stick fighting? Right?
It's less strenuous, so you do see a lot of bigger bellies in a Kali, and people let themselves go a little bit. Because it's a very adaptive system by nature, but it is still taught in a very traditional way where follow step by step by step by step. Out of the X amount of students that stay long enough, very few of them become teachers and masters because they either love it and they train their asses off to fit that criteria, that mold. Versus you guys tell us, look, here's a basic understanding. Here's a structure that you can follow for now to exercise to get your body to move. But you also push us immediately to start thinking of those movements for ourselves.
Right, and break that down for me, because I think that's one of the more fascinating things that we do is we give you something, then we tell you to make it move for you.
Right.
You know, again, we're not teaching the masses, we're teaching the individuals. Even though we will have a class of 10 students, the lessons are given, and then we will then walk to each individual and see, how did you understand that? Because, as I've said time and time again, each individual will understand what's given to them differently. And you have to, as an instructor, I've always felt that you have to understand, how is this particular student understanding what I'm giving them? And until I actually know that, I won't know for sure what they're comprehending or what they're understanding of what's being given. Yeah. I've had students where I thought they were understanding it, and when we do a sit down or we pull them to the side and talk about it, they totally had no clue what we were saying. So we had to figure out, how do we best do this? And for me and Danny, or at least the way Danny says it, you need to make it an individual thing. It can't be, you can't teach the masses. I mean, sure, you get the basic ideas and the fundamentals, but then you do have to go back in and show a little bit more and then really understand what that particular student understands. So
yeah, you definitely have to test the comprehension behind what was given to somebody else. And it's not a matter of just repeating the things that you told us, because, again, traditionally that's what people do, and it sounds good, but it doesn't convey understanding. And a lot of that has to do with the student not being able to get away from something as simple as you're going to put your own twist on things. As humans, whatever information we take in, we're going to put our own understanding, our own history behind it, and that's what's going to come out, as much as we think it's traditional. And I think Danny realized that years ago and said, well, why don't we focus on teaching that? Instead of getting these people to do something a certain way for so long and then eventually once they have enough under their belt, they can do whatever they want with it. Well, why don't we get them to do that from the very beginning? And the pressure test for that is really just a simple question. But what do you think?
I like how you break that down as far as a simple question. What do you think? Which is really unheard of in any martial arts system.
Yeah, I'm the teacher, but give me your opinion on what I just gave.
Yeah, that's totally new. And and that blows a lot of people's mind when they hear that.
Yeah.
We've had people come in and from other systems wanting to learn with us, and they get in there and we ask them their opinion. They're like,
they're flabbergasted.
What?
Yeah, they don't know what to do with it.
Right, and they don't stay, oddly enough, because it's just too different for them.
It's a little overwhelming. I'm lucky enough to come from having no martial arts background.
Right.
So my whole concept of martial arts was what I saw in movies. Very, very Hollywood kung fu kind of style mentality. Yeah. And I even approached my training at the beginning in a very similar fashion. I did the drills hundreds of times. I mean, I bled. I had blisters on both hands.
Right.
I had scrapes. I had bruises from punching a tree, from elbowing trees, kicking, and all these things. And then I did it very traditional. And it wasn't until years later, because I'm not that very good of a student, actually. I'm consistent.
Yeah,
I'm not that good of a student.
We can't seem to get rid of them.
They fed me once, and they won't let me go. But once I started realizing that you truly cared about what I thought about what you were teaching,
right,
that I started growing more and more.
So that's funny. You had mentioned just a second ago. You said they fed me once, and I like that because Danny was always he hated the idea of hearing, and he would say it just like this. He says, stop being spoon-fed, because you go to a place, and if you're not getting it right, the teacher will then break it down and sit there right in front of you and have you do the very this, and then this, and then this, and just really spoon-feeding you. Whereas, like you're saying, we don't tend to do that. We say, okay, how are you going to get to this? What is your, how are you going to move it so that you can make it comfortable for you?
Right. Taking into consideration the mechanics that we use, the body is broken down pretty much the same way for everything. Shoulders, elbows, wrists, legs, all that. But everything around that structure is going to be different depending on your diet, depending on your height, your weight. All these other things will change the way you are able to move. Injuries, for example, will keep you from moving a certain way. So you have to take into consideration the individual thought process in order for them to take a concept and adapt it to the way they move.
Right.
Which is how the people that are remembered in martial arts, those innovators, realize that's what they had to do. They moved for themselves.
Right.
They took the system and said, they created something new. And I think that's where people kind of go backwards about 5 steps.
Right.
And try to make this new thing into a traditional thing.
Yeah, and you're right. It's like Bruce Lee started to move the way he moved because it was the way he moved.
For him, for his body type.
It wasn't so much that this is the way I was taught to move. He couldn't understand it. He says, I can't move that way. It's not comfortable. It's not natural. So he developed, JKD, and it became his signature thing is that there's nothing traditional about what he does. But he got in a lot of flack about it. But
he did because of it. Because a lot of traditional minds, a lot of the old school mentality is like, no, this is the proper way of doing it.
Right.
You're doing it improperly. You're doing it wrong.
Right, because they said you're not supposed to move that way.
Right, you can't. You're not. And even that, and that's a very good point to bring up because now JKD is a traditional form of fighting.
Right. How funny is that? Ironic.
Which, in the past couple of weeks, based on the conversations we've been having and with your brother, I've come to realize that is so ridiculous. Because if you take his teachings to heart, you should be developing your own way of movement.
Yeah, all along the system.
The whole way through. You take ideas, this works for me, I'm going to use it my way.
Right.
And that's the part that people forget. They want to use it, they want to look like Bruce Lee, they want to kick like Bruce Lee.
They want to emulate.
They want to emulate, you have to train and you have to do this. And, there are some truth behind his physicality and the way that, because he was a gym rat.
Yeah.
He went to the gym, he swam every day.
Right.
He lift weights. he was a gym rat. He wanted to look good.
That's funny. I remember watching Rocky, the very first one.
Oh.
And when he started drinking that egg, I was like, oh, I'm going to do that. Because, you know, you emulate shit. You think, oh, I'm going to be badass. And I'm going to do that. So I drank eggs. Nasty as heck.
But you did it.
But we did it because we're like, ooh, you know, monkey see, monkey do is a thing.
Right. And that's where the bladed mind really took me for a loop.
Yeah.
Is because I did the monkey see, monkey do. And you can attest to this for how many years?
Oh yeah.
I was going in such a wrong direction. I was doing things right.
Right.
But up onto the surface level. I wasn't taking into account the ideas that you were putting behind everything, the concepts that went into the process.
Right.
I wasn't questioning what you were giving me. You were just a, older Mr. Miyagi looking kind of Filipino dude. Oh, he's round and he's old. Oh, he must know what he's talking about.
Right.
I'm just going to copy what he's doing. But I can't move like you.
Right.
And
that's the thing, you know, we try to look to our instructors and say, oh, I want to move just like that. Yeah, you want to give them all these.
I'm not worthy.
You want to give them all these things, and you realize I can't do this way.
So
you know, I have a bad shoulder, I have a bad leg, or whatever it is. I can't move like that. So, like you said, you know, a lot of the students will then end up leaving for one reason or another because they can't be what their instructors want them to be.
Right.
Whereas, you know, we have always welcomed any student, shape, body type, it doesn't matter.
Age.
You know, even
mentality.
mentality.
72 years old.
Yeah.
He's a badass though. He can hit.
Oh yeah. So where do you think this puts you as far as, you know, you've been with us about 6 years.
Yeah.
You've taken all the things that we've given you, and you pretty much made it your own. I mean, that's one of the things that I like to be very proud of, is that you've become your own student, instructor, and whatnot. And I know it's taken a long time.
Oh, yeah, no.